the latest in the series of Why Records Management Matters events. I'm John Peelan. I'm Director of the Scottish Council on Archives. We're a small advocacy and development body based in Edinburgh. I'm delighted today to welcome our speaker, Maria Lim. Maria is an information architect with Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and Maria is also the chair of IRMS Scotland. After Maria's talk, we'll be inviting you to ask questions or make comments, but in the meantime, I'd appreciate it if you could just make sure that your microphones are on mute. So without further ado, I'm now going to hand you over to Maria, whose talk is called Information Records Management, the Importance of Records Management to Business Efficiency. Maria.
Let me unmute myself. I always forget to do that. Good afternoon, everybody. I am joining you today from sunny Aberdeen in the north of Scotland. And you know, as I always start my webinar, if I'm honest, most of the guys who attend my webinars at IRMS Scotland, I always start with, where are you? How's the weather? Very British-like fashion. So that's what I'm saying. So if you want to type in a little bit about where you're coming from and how the weather is in that, where you are, that would be great. Let me just try and share my presentation. Okay, hopefully I'm in presentation mode. So we can start. It's not, okay, so I think people are still coming in, Jan. So my presentation is about the importance of records management to business efficiency. I'm an HPE information architect and I am the current chair of IRMS Scotland. A little bit more about me. How come I can talk about this thing? I have been a consultant in information records management for a while now, but my background is, my basic background is library science and information management. Like most of you probably are. I am quite active in the Information and Records Management Society. Apart from being the Scotland chair, I do spearhead the IRMS roundtables, coming out of issues from that our community basically talks about in the JISC thread. I spearheaded the creation of the roundtables. As it turns out, a lot of people were wanting that. So as an outcome of the IRMS roundtables, of course, now IRMS is now part of a Microsoft Customer Advisory Board, which I also spearhead together with Rob Bath, with Ren Lemming, with David Reeve and Penny Wright, and regulators, you know, national archives of a lot of Western and countries, the US, Canada, Australia, a number of European countries. And now we've also welcomed other regulators in the Microsoft CAB. I think we've welcomed the Securities and Exchange Commission, the finance authorities in the US, which is really, really amazing. And basically, it's because of the support of our community. I'm also active at AIM because, being an information and records manager and consultant as well, we wear a lot of hats. So I'm also active at AIM. I'm active at CILIP. I do attend the Association of Project Management and the Business IIBA, International Institute of Business Analysts. 7 years of Microsoft 365, 12 years of SharePoint, and 31 years in information management. That's the boring part about me. I love to travel. Good food and good friends is something that I always hopefully I can go back to after this lockdown. I play volleyball when I can. The knees are starting to to ache a little bit more than normal, but let's see how far it'll bring me to. I love choir singing. The photo that I am showing you right now is actually when the Pope was here in Glasgow. So there you go. So that's enough about me. So importance of records management to business efficiency. Let me start with this. So Winston Churchill said, those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it. This is basically what he said in 1948. And it rang true then, it still rings true now. So Norbert Juma explored it a little bit more to say that an understanding of the successes and failures of the past is important if we are to grow and make progress going forward. If we do not learn from our past mistakes, we are bound to repeat them. And I think, and please tell me your views, this is still very true right now. But how do we make sure we don't repeat our mistakes? Basically in keeping records, part of which is the records management aspects of it. Is it the records of just successes? No, the records of both successes and failures are equal in importance. You know, the successes so that you know what process to follow, failures because you know what initiatives to avoid. If you do not know what that is, how can you avoid repeating the mistakes of the past? So to be quite honest, within this slide alone, I was going to say, okay, and that completes my my presentation already. But let's dig further. But this is the overarching and the most compelling justification for it. So let's go further. Business efficiency. So organizations and businesses. Let me just see how I can move this. Okay, so let's look at an organizational function or the functions of an organization, whatever organization you belong to, whatever structure there is. Of course, right now you've got hierarchical organizations, matrix organizations, network organizations, whatever structure your organization has, these functions, this is not all the functions because we will run out of time if we, but these are some core functions that I'm going to focus on as I discuss business efficiencies. So whatever your organizational structure is, some of the core functions would be sales and marketing, operations, finance, HR, and a new introduction with the matrix organization structure, projects, and purchasing. So going through that, okay, before I move ahead, can everybody hear me clearly? I'm just not used to not having any feedback from my audience, as I mentioned earlier. I hope, John, Robert, am I being heard clearly? Just in case I am not.
Yep, all good to me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's deep dive a little bit more on that. So these are the organizational functions we're going to focus on. Now, why are they important? Sometimes as records and information managers, we focus too much on the detail and forget the overarching justification of why certain documents, certain trackers, certain communications need to be kept. So this is basically a reminder for everybody on each business function. So let's start with sales and marketing. What does sales and marketing do? So businesses are there to make money. So as a business, marketing is an essential function to reach your goal. Apart from that, if you do not do marketing, you cannot drive sales. So that's the reason why sales and marketing always go hand in hand. So when you think, oh, what type of record should I keep? So you have to think through, what is the core function of it? It's to reach the end goal, which is to make money. So what marketing initiatives actually produce the sales? How much sales is it producing? Which target market is it affecting? Those are important records because those are processes that are repeatable, successes that are repeatable, that if you have a record of some other person or the entire team can basically repeat it and repeat the money-making initiatives that this marketing process produces. But as important as finding or recording or ensuring that you keep records of these successful initiatives are those that failed. Because at some point, somebody will go, oh, why don't we do it this way? And then because nobody checked that, yep, they did, but that doesn't work for that specific market segment, and there was no record of it, who would say that, well, actually we did that before and it failed. Okay, and then the notes of why it failed. Okay, so as important as the records of success is the record of failures, because sometimes on the failures, if the failures are properly recorded, then when somebody revisits them in the future, they would know what things not to repeat. So within sales and marketing, that is the important aspects of it. Okay, let's move to another function, operations. This is where, sorry about that. This is where a lot of records kept sometimes fail, because operations is massive. The operations function in businesses is basically the catalyst. It is the center of the organization and it oversees various business functions. So this is where everything merges. So it's the umbrella connecting all the facets of business. But what are key records to think through when you are thinking of records for operations, for the operations function? Well, the operations function's core is the production of goods or delivery of a service. So the record of producing those goods or delivering those services are the operational records that needs to be kept, so that, again, a repeatable process of success can be done. Finding out whether it is managed well. So management of documentation of records that provide evidence of the management of resources in operation. Resources being the people, the equipment, the technology, the information needed to produce the goods and all deliver the services. So the production of goods or delivery, so from inception to delivery, and then the details of having done it from inception to delivery, that's where the core records are. Okay, we move on to the next aspect of it. Are there any questions so far? Let me have a look. Okay, none yet. Okay, so the next one is finance. Very important. A lot of organizations, a lot of industry vertical have previously were being managed by very technical people, and a lot of them have shifted to being managed by finance people, bankers and management accountants. Now, the role of finance in business ensures that there are enough funds to operate. So it's very important. So financial records are important because they need to be recorded and kept accurate and up to date. So apart from accuracy, they need to be kept up to date. And a lot of the key records has to do with costs, with revenues, with cash flows, break-even point, profit and loss, and business performance. So for us, this is a no-brainer. We kind of know how important this is. In new technological organizations, they call some of these as your burn rate. How much money do you burn every month to be able to operate as a business? Next, let's move to the next one. And my next one is HR. Ooh. So the HR is the backbone of a business. It deals with the most important and complex. So a lot of say, yeah, it's the most important, but don't forget complex resource in the business, which is the people. And a lot of the key records are in strategic management, wages and salary. One of the key things that you have to remember with HR is with its processes. So with HR things, with performance management, with any HR issues, the most important thing with the HR processes is being able to show that with an initiative, you were able to follow the required processes by law, because this is where a lot of the HR failings are. I'm like thinking, what's the most famous one that we could think of? I was reading through, I don't know if you guys would remember the Jeremy Vine, Samira Ahmed scenario with the gender pay gap. When lawyers look at it, and I attended, I think, one webinar, and the legal people looked at it more closely. The reason why Samira Ahmed, well, apart from the fact that it was quite obvious that it's a gender pay gap, the failing of the BBC has to do with not being able to show a standard process for a standard process and a standard analysis for making the decision of how much a person should be paid. In this case, why is Jeremy Vine different from Samira Ahmed? I mean, that is basically what happened, because they could not prove. There was no record of a standard process being followed. There was no record of decision made as to why there is a difference, that the same process and standards are being applied to all BBC correspondents. That is a very classic failing of HR things. And those of you who are managers, you know that when you're dealing with things like redundancies, alcoholism, if there were HR type issues, you really have to follow and document and prove, because if anything goes wrong, those documents that you keep, which is an output of the process that you follow, are very, very critical and important. Okay, I did too much on that one. So beyond HR, let us go to purchasing and supply chain. So another function of business is responsible for procurement process. So supply goods, and so the key thing here is goods must be procured at the right time, in the right quantity, and of the right quality. Okay, so apart from that is proving that you have done it in a compliant manner, especially if you're doing your ISO certifications. Prove that before purchasing such goods, you did the proper way of ensuring that you've got 3 comparative costs from 3 different vendors and made your decision properly. So key records, how did you achieve the best possible price? Because sometimes if it is not documented, for example, when you're buying something and buying one does not give you the best price, but you have to buy the 12 so that each component price is cheaper. There are scenarios like that. As consumers, we often make those types of decisions. But if you do not record why you went for the 12 pieces instead of buying the 1 piece, then it becomes a questionable process. You were just asked to buy 1. Why did you buy 12? Kind of stuff. Even if your justification is quite good. So that's where a lot of the important records are, and business efficiencies. Projects. Okay, you're going, Maria, projects as a business function. Projects emerged as a business function only in recent times. And the reason for this is the emergence of what's called the matrix organization. So some of you, I'm not sure about your backgrounds. However, in the big enterprise commercial world, around 5, 8 or 10 years back, a lot of the big corporations reorganized themselves into what's called a matrix organization. So what's a matrix organization? The matrix organization is, if you imagine an Excel worksheet, at the top of it are the functions that we are just discussing. On the left side of it are the projects. Okay, so you've got project 1, project 2. So why did it come about? Well, it's because corporations like Shell are finding that competition is driving them to become more efficient. Thus, they need to ensure that all their projects are properly manned, properly done, with the right people, so on and so forth. So they transitioned from a hierarchical organization to a matrix organization. Thus, with that, a lot of other organizations transitioned into this type of structure. Therefore, highlighting the importance of projects to a lot of business organizations. So it is vital for delivering successful change in any organization and business because projects are more controlled. Okay, you manage the risk compared with operations. So we dealt with operations earlier. So compared with operations, projects you have more control over it. Thus, a lot of the big organizations have a project-based product development and services that they do, or any change within their organization. Like most of you would have gone through the changes to Microsoft 365 from a traditional file shared structure. You don't just implement it. You need to ensure that a process is followed so that the impact and the implementation is more successful. So as projects, as you guys know, have a lot of key records that needs to be kept, because as much as records of successful project needs to be kept, records of failed projects are also important, especially if they run up to the millions. I remember being in a government organization, and one of the directors was telling me, Maria, sometimes letting the bus fall into the cliff is something that we cannot do anything about. However, the best thing we can do is ensure that we record what we have done to make sure it doesn't happen, but it still happened. Okay, so sometimes there are things like that. I remember that. That's the reason why when you're in a project and when I'm in a project, I make sure I keep records of everything, just in case I get asked at some point. Okay, so with all these things that I've explained, so we went from Churchill at the start, and then here we are. Our goal is to create a modern repository of knowledge, records and history comparable to what the Library of Alexandria was to the ancient world. So we are basically the guardians of these records and knowledge and history within our small organization. Maybe if you belong to a bigger organization, basically this is what we want to aspire for. Whether you're building something physical or you're building something digital, this is the aspiration. What the Library of Alexandria was to the ancient world. And with that, I thank you, everybody, and I'll open the floor to any questions. So this is me. If you want to get in touch, my email address is maria.lim@hpe.com. And of course, from IRMS, I am scotland@irms.org.uk. So opening the floor now to questions, John.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Maria. That was a really compelling case for the importance of records to underpinning any business or any organization. In this series of talks, we've heard a lot about the importance of records management to accountability and transparency. So to hear about their impact and their relevance to business efficiency is really important. I'll ask people in the audience, please, to think of questions or comments to make. But in the meantime, I've one. Is there a danger, Maria, of ending up having lots of records and reports but not actually using them? Because reporting and recording is one thing, but actually accessing and using the information in a constructive way is another. And all of us have experience of being involved in lengthy reports, but actually you get a new person comes in, perhaps a new chief executive or head of department, and there's a breath of fresh air, and everything that's been done before is kind of left on the shelf. And is there a way maybe of encouraging a culture whereby the records are not seen as being something that you might want to access at some point, but actually as living, active documents that can be used on an ongoing basis?
I think a lot of people, I guess I'm like thinking through how we have been trained in at university and stuff. Like I think as information and records managers, we've always been evidence-based. So I think with that, we have a good starting point. And when I went to MBA and I went to engineering school, a lot of the processes that I had to go through are also evidence-based. You don't just decide on something just because it looks right. You have to validate that. And that validation process is the one that would drive and compel people to actively check on the records. Where we need to be efficient in as records managers, archivists, whatever it is the capture and the easy access of these records. Because I remember when I was working for oil and gas, I would see the geologists sitting on the floor going through slides one by one because they just couldn't find what needed to be found. I remember that, and I thought, no, there must be a more efficient way of doing that as a records manager, and with all the technology that we have. That is the thing going for us. This is our age. This is our age. we need to be in the forefront of a lot of organizations. We cannot be hidden away anymore. We are at the forefront because within our hands is access to that knowledge and all that stuff. So yeah, this is something that we need to be aware of and constantly driving for. Do you have any good practice tips for getting all staff on side with the need to review an organization's records management? There's a lot of good practices, Carl. However, I'll give you one set of advice that always works for me as a business consultant. Every time I implement something, the first thing, especially in a Western country, the first thing that I go for is what are the benefits of implementing my records management system to the individual? If you can surface that, you've won them. Okay, so what could be? So we were just talking about that. Because you are able to provide a quicker way to access that information, this person can go home at 3 o'clock to his family instead of staying and going through the records. So that's one of the key things. There are a lot more. It's just that highlighting the personal benefit I found in the Western world is very compelling. Straight away you get them. I mean, if you've gone into our communication series previously with IRMS Scotland, this is something that we have repeated again and again, because yeah, that's you. User adoption is quicker in whatever things if you highlight personal benefit first. Of course, if you are dealing with the other side of the world where I came from, which is the eastern side of the world, we go by what I call that bandwagon. Okay, so if you're implementing records management in the eastern hemisphere or side of the world, it's more to do with like everybody does it this way because the team sees it. That is the most compelling argument there. So I hope that would help you, Carl, if you are getting justifications on all these stuff. Surface the personal benefit and you win all the time. Okay.
Maria,
Yes.
I imagine lots of people who are listening in today are from the public sector, and obviously the public sector, there's a requirement to comply with legislation of the Public Records Scotland Act. And there will also be people here from the private sector. We're also interested at Scottish Council Archives on smaller groups, you know, community archives and small heritage organisations. But generally, I mean, are there lessons that you think can be drawn from the larger, you know, public sector and private sector organisations that can apply to small organisations in terms of good records management? I assume that the issues that you've addressed in terms of finance and HR and sales and marketing are the same no matter what the size of the organisation.
That's very true, John. Whatever the size of organization, it's just putting them into perspective with that. It's just you're dealing with a smaller one. But the thing with records management, with or without technology, as long as you keep them in order and you ensure that it's easy for users to access them, then you've won. You don't need Microsoft 365 or OpenText to do that. I mean, I have seen a lot of organizations deal with it from filing cabinets still at this day and age because we, you know, we're always constrained by budget. But does that mean you can't do your job? No. I have seen a lot of very efficient and effective organizations, small business organizations who are well organized and could provide the same types of efficiencies as somebody who has invested in a lot of technologies. It has to do with that, with ensuring that your processes are sound and standard, basically.
I mean, this series of events, and as you know, it was originally meant to be a conference, is primarily about advocacy. It's about, I mean, we're probably preaching mostly to the converted in terms of the people here today, but this event will be recorded and we're sharing it with as many people as possible. Did you have any experience of a light bulb moment, where you've worked with an organization who perhaps hadn't fully appreciated the importance of good records management, but then through either your intervention or others, changed the culture of the organization to place more emphasis on it?
Yep, I have several actually. Unfortunately, and this is the sad thing about it, most of the time, the light bulb moments come when one, they are fined by the government, unfortunately, or there is a big lawsuit. Okay, when I was in the oil and gas industry, there was this big issue with records being kept about Dick Cheney, I think, dealing with Iraq, something like that. And then they ran e-discovery, and there you go. There was a record of email that was found, and then he claimed to everyone that no, never dealt with it. Has nothing to do with him. And then there was evidence of it. After that incident, the organization literally poured millions of pounds into a more efficient information and records management process. Other government organizations that I have dealt with, their CSIRO basically was given a lot of funding for a new information records management system after they got involved in a big government inquiry. Basically, our wish is that it shouldn't go into that extreme for heads of our organization to put those investments. So we just need to ensure that we keep on telling, the heads of our organization to say, we don't want to get into that situation before you actually find the importance of information and records management.
Okay, so we want to turn the light bulb on before the big fine, not afterwards.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, well, I think, Maria, people are probably getting hungry for their lunch now.
Yes.
So we've got your contact details and they're up there on the screen. We don't have any more comments or questions. So I think at this point, I'm just going to ask everyone, as I always do, to have a virtual round of applause for you. And thank everyone for coming, and to thank you very much for a really interesting and informative lunchtime talk. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Please get in touch if there's anything. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And all the thanks for coming in.